Many of you, right now, believe that there is something wrong with what is going on around us, and you suspect that it is not natural. You suspect foul play. You see, people are supposed to use discernment to divide fact and fiction, but yet they turn around and use their imaginations to bring them together. And so now, because of all these theories, they are certain, they are sure these things are being caused by neither God nor nature, but man. See, I do not have all the answers, and I am not always right, but I do know that ever since Haiti was hit with that earthquake back in 2010, every time something bad happens, every time there's some bad weather, people turn their heads and look at things like HAARP. They do. The High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. People think that they can modify the weather, and they are right, they can. They can do it, but are they doing it? Well, we're going to take a closer look at this, because this is out of control, and I'm not talking about the weather. No, I'm talking about beliefs held with strong conviction, manifested out of misunderstanding, victims of a great deception. People fear what they do not understand. But when people come to a better understanding, that fear begins to disintegrate. Now, HAARP, like CERN and Frankenstein, is one of those things that probably should not have been created. Like CERN, HAARP is the result of Nikola Tesla's technology. Now, if you didn't know, Tesla was known for having visions of his designs, and it is said that those visions came from the other side. So let me take you back. In 1884, Tesla sailed to New York City, where he went to work for Thomas Edison. He offered Tesla a great deal of money to improve upon the designs of his direct current or DC motors, and Tesla did just that. But Edison stiffed him, so Tesla quit. He then went to work for the Western Union Company, developing AC or alternating current power systems. The motors I built there, Tesla said, were exactly as I imagined them. I made no attempt to improve the design, but merely reproduced the pictures as they appeared to my vision. And the operation was always as I expected. Now, after Tesla was able to develop his Tesla coils, he wanted to work on his ideas for wireless transmission, and so he hooked up with J.P. Morgan, who would put up the money to build Wardenclyffe Tower in 1901, a giant transmission tower based on Tesla's idea of a wireless planet. As soon as completed, it would be possible for a businessman in New York to dictate instructions and have them instantly appear and type at his office in London or elsewhere. He will be able to call up from his desk and talk to any telephone subscriber on the globe, without any change whatever in the existing equipment. An inexpensive instrument, not bigger than a watch, will enable its bearer to hear anywhere on sea or land, music or song, the speech of a political leader, the address of an eminent man of science, or the sermon of an eloquent clergyman, delivered in some other place, however distant. In the same manner, any picture, character, drawing, or print can be transferred from one to another place. Millions of such instruments can be operated from but one plant of this kind. Now let's fast forward to around the early 1990s. The Atlantic Richfield Company, or ARCO, an American oil company, needed to sell gas out of Alaska, and so they financed the project concept of Bernard Eastlund, an American physicist and patent author, who would create 23 U.S. patents, one of those patents being based on the work of Tesla. a 40 square mile radio transmitter that used Alaskan natural gas to power its generators. And so the U.S. Air Force and Navy got together with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, BAE Advanced Technologies, and the University of Alaska Fairbanks to give birth to HAARP. Now that right there tells you that HAARP was in fact intended for military defense and research purposes. They wanted to develop advanced defense and weapons technologies. That's just what the military does. That's what they are supposed to do. Make weapons, protect the borders. But even before HAARP's completion in 1994 and after, they have been under pressure from environmentalist and conservation organizations from every angle, with concerns about the safety of the program. Because back then and even now, the scientists there have admitted that they do not fully understand the consequences to using such technology. And so their logic was, well, if we want to find out the impact this will have on the planet, we are going to need to experiment on the planet. Now, HAARP, of course, is just the name of the program. The machine that everyone is familiar with is known as the IRI, the Ionospheric Research Instrument, which is detailed in HAARP's Environmental Impact Statement. An excerpt of this can be easily found on the University of Alaska Fairbanks Geophysical Institute website. The IRI consists of 180 cross-dipole antennas, arranged in a grid pattern of 12 rows and 15 columns, with all the low-frequency antennas stacked above all the high-frequency antennas. Each antenna is supported by a 66-foot mast mounted on a 4-foot steel base, with a distance of 80 feet between each antenna. The entire IRI antenna field, including the perimeter fencing, occupies 35 acres of land. Now, the low-frequency antennas transmits 3.2 megawatts of energy in a frequency range of 2.8 to 7.6 megahertz. The high-frequency antennas also transmit 3.2 megawatts of energy, but in a frequency range of 7.3 to 10 megahertz. And what they do is they focus these transmissions into the ionosphere, heating it up. It's like using a microwave oven with no door, so all that energy is directed out to wherever you point the microwave. At the same time, they can use the high concentration of ions and free electrons in the ionosphere to reflect radio waves. So what happens is they create these virtual reflectors or mirrors in the ionosphere to basically send these transmissions to anywhere on the planet. When they do this, it gives them several capabilities. They can take these radio waves, aim them at the ground, and then read the frequencies that bounce back, a kind of ultrasound. It can tell them what elements are in the ground, as well as if there are any tunnels or hidden missile silos. Ground penetrating radar that can see animals, birds, and groups of insects even. They can use the charging of the ionosphere to act as a global shield. And the idea is, if a missile were launched and it entered the section of the ionosphere that was charged, the intensity of the energy would cause the missile to explode midair. They can even detect stealth aircraft, that which of course is not visible by normal radar, but by HAARP technology. Pretty cool, right? Well, they also discovered that they could manipulate weather. They could push storm systems in certain directions. They could excite a storm system and place that over the enemy to cripple them. They can send lightning. With enough power, they can even pump these transmissions into the ground, creating such violent vibrations that they cause earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Which brings us to what's happening today. Folks, we are facing back-to-back hurricanes. Harvey, Irma, Jose is making its way up the East Coast, and now Maria is headed for the islands. We've got this nut over in North Korea, a country smaller than New York State, completely surrounded by opposition, pushing buttons threatening people. Threatening the very same people who own and operate these HAARP-like machines. So why don't they use these machines on this guy? Well, maybe they have. They did deploy the Navy's SBX-1 mobile sea-based radar weather weapon back in 2013 near North Korea. So maybe this is why they seem to not be too overly concerned about what this madman can do. Now the question on everyone's mind lately is HAARP the cause of all the strange and devastating weather phenomena? Well, the military did leave HAARP under the operation of the universities back in 2015, so that scientists could still use HAARP for research purposes on a pay-per-use basis, which is about $5,000 per use. In fact, they do now allow the public to visit the facility during its open houses. So, whatever the military or government was using HAARP for in the past, I do not think they are using it for that purpose now. They have most likely moved on to a similar technology that is more advanced, somewhere else. I mean, they first started running HAARP over 20 years ago, and today this type of technology, folks, is found in different forms all around the globe. You cannot pin everything on HAARP. That would be foolish. But like I said, I put nothing past the government. But at the same time, I am more inclined to believe that what's happening is ultimately the work of external forces. I'm talking about the sun and everything out there in space. We've recently had several very large solar flares, those photon fluxes, hit us. One of these flares was followed by the 8.2 earthquake that hit Mexico recently. We are always overdue for every major cataclysm, and every year there is record-breaking volcanism, earthquakes, and bad weather. The Earth has been doing this for years now, and we are not living on the only celestial body that has been going through these changes. And as far as I know, they don't have a HAARP on Mars, or on the moon, or anywhere else in space for that matter. The only other thing that I think could possibly harness this technology is, of course, orbiting satellites. Know and understand, folks, that every time they fire a rocket into space, every time they launch a satellite or use a satellite, every time they transmit to the ISS, every time they fire up HAARP and CERN, they punch holes in the layers of our atmosphere, and Earth has to accommodate for that. It has to fill in these holes, these pockets, with something. So yes, human beings and madmen are part of the problem, but I do not think that they are all of the problem. You see, there are many God-fearing people who do not believe that God is at all responsible for what's happening, and they do not believe he would send a hurricane to ruin lives. But did you know that many of these hurricane victims believe in God now more than they ever did? More and more people are now turning to him as a result of these happenings. And the Holy Scriptures do state that these things would occur. It just does not state how, only that they will. The point of all this, folks, is do not focus all of your attention on HAARP and what the government is doing, because honestly, I believe they know what's coming, and they just want to hide and protect themselves from it, which is probably why they want to control the elements so bad. And so they are willing to allow everyone to worry about HAARP, while the real threat is closing in on them. So, when I see everyone